One of the exciting developments over the last few years for architectural visualization is the available of some real-time rendering tools that really speed up and make the process of rendering these images much easier. Just for contrast, let's go ahead and look at the method for doing this sort of rendering within the Revit application, and then we'll show you a real-time tool that actually can greatly speed up the process if you do have a highly powered machine with a graphics processor. So let's open the Render tool. And this is the typical way we go through and do this. We open the render tool using one of the 3D camera views that we've created. We make sure the lighting looks well, choose a setting for the quality we like, and we say render. While this process is going on, what's happening is mathematically we're computing a lighting model. Based on the lighting we've chosen, we're trying to figure out basically how much light hits each of those different surfaces, how much light would bounce off of them, and then after that lighting model is calculated, we're going back and then mapping the materials to them. So as you can see, it takes a while to do that. Okay, the lighting model's been calculated, we're mapping the materials, and now we're going through and refining the image iteratively to go ahead and make it a little bit better. So this process works. That's a process called ray tracing, and it's available right within the Revit application. So this is a standard way of doing it, or we can do it in the cloud if we prefer to use the cloud resources to do that. But I want to show you another technique that may be very useful to you. I'm really excited about using this approach instead. So I'm going to close that up. And instead, we're going to take a look at a real-time rendering tool. The first one we're going to look at is one called Enscape, which is available freely for you as a student. So to get Enscape, there's a site where enscape3d.com, educational license, makes this available to you. You can get a student license valid for 24 months, and you can kind of keep on renewing that as long as you're a student. It's a great tool to be working with. The big limitation or kind of requirement you have to know about is that your machine has to have the right hardware to do this. So your computer needs to have a graphics processor running on your machine, and with that graphics processor, you can go through and do this. If you don't have a graphics processor, it just won't work. It won't be available. So that'll work on a lot of PCs that have graphics processors. If you have an older Intel-based Mac, it'll also run under Boot Camp. Okay, so you have some different choices there. And if you're a regular Mac OS user, this tool won't be available to you from within Revit, although there is a tool or a version of this that runs from SketchUp. So you can use that if you're doing SketchUp modeling. But once you've downloaded and installed the software, it shows up in kind of a very simple way. There's an Enscape tab that appears now in your Revit application, so you can choose that. And here you see a start menu and kind of a list of different views. These are all different 3D camera views. And I'm just going to take the same camera view, the one that we rendered in Revit, and render it using Enscape just to show you what the difference is. So we've chosen that. I'm going to say start. It'll start up the Enscape window, taking just a minute to load the resources. Now the Enscape window actually appears as a separate window just on top of the Revit window. Revit's still hanging around back there. Okay, and we're going to use them both in just a little bit. You might want to try and put them side by side. Okay, so now we're looking at the Enscape view, the rendering view. This is real-time rendering, and what do I mean by that? What's going to show you, the simplest way is probably just to kind of start navigating around. So I'm going to click into this window. Then I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard just to start navigating around. You can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. You can use your mouse to start rotating or orbiting around to kind of get to different perspectives. But as you work within this window, you can see that we're getting a really nicely rendered version of the image, okay? But it's also navigable. We can kind of work with this in real time, and it's going to reflect whatever is going on in the Revit window just very quickly here. And just as soon as we make a change, it'll show up here too. So this is kind of a really useful tool for what we want to do. Again, in this window, we can navigate around using the arrow keys or your mouse, or even if you have a Xbox controller, you can kind of use that. We can move up and down using the keyboard shortcuts here. Pivot around, or we can even go through and start changing the lighting. So for example, the lighting was one of the things that took a while to compute in the render that's been done within the Revit engine. It's kind of locked to a specific point in time. In this engine, you'll see though, it's actually real time. So I can kind of adjust the lighting for the time of day and kind of immediately see the effect of the shadows. Let me pop on in. One of the big advantages of these sorts of technologies is how they work for interior renders. So let me go into the house for a second. Because lighting the interior can often be somewhat difficult. But again, as a real-time rendering engine, it's going to do a pretty good job of adjusting the lighting and adjusting the exposure so things always look good. So here we are within the space. We can take a look around at how things look. And this again is really dynamically linked to whatever is happening in Revit. So what do I mean by that? Let me just kind of show you what the impact of that is. So for example, if I am in Revit, let me go to another view there. That lets me kind of walk around and see the inside. Okay, now I'm looking at sort of a similar view, just being the Revit shaded view. If I choose, for example, that floor, and let's kind of look at it again in Enscape. So here it is in Enscape. I'll just kind of pop it over there. You can kind of see the rendered floor over there and how that looks. Let's go ahead and change it in the Revit window just to give you a sense of what that would be and how responsive it can be. So we're over here, that's looking fine. I'm just going to go through and edit the properties of this floor. Okay, we will change the materiality of that floor. Right now you'll see it's kind of an oaky looking floor, kind of a medium tone. If I choose to change the appearance of that floor, let me change it just to something else. I'll just go through and make it a wood. Let's see if I can go for a nice dark wood instead. So I have some nice floorings here. I'll go for this oak espresso floor. That's a much darker color. We'll change that in Revit. You'll see the shaded appearance changes a little bit over here. But if I now go back over to Enscape, you'll see that it's changed there too. Okay, so that's the idea, is that you could make changes in Revit and dynamically have things updated just automatically in this rendered view, so you don't have to go back in and keep on re-rendering things time and time again. So it's like having a live rendered view, and that can really speed up your process. So if your computer can run the Enscape extension because you have the graphics processor necessary, it's just a very useful thing to have loaded on your machine to really make your rendering process work a whole lot easier.